And I'm going to go over to Lynn for the sediment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Members, if you hear your name, could you confirm your attendance, please? Councillor Maitland? Here. Roberts Todd?
Here.
Councillor Friel?
Yes, Lynn, I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Cowan?
Here.
Councillor Mackay?
Present, Lynn.
Councillor Barton?
Here.
Councillor Holland?
Here, thanks.
Councillor Lennox?
Morning, here.
We have an apology this morning from Councillor Crawford. Councillor Watts?
Yes, Lynn, I'm here.
Councillor Filson?
Here.
Councillor Hogg?
Good morning, I'm here, thank you.
And Councillor Stewart? Councillor Stewart? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. And I'd like to ask if any of the members want to declare any interest. Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to this morning's business. We have one item on the agenda. It's planning application number 21/0262/PP, and it's an application for planning permission for proposed residential development of 39 detached and semi-detached houses at land adjacent to Home Farm B7081 from Moat View to Gateshead Cross House K2 OBQ, and that's in pages 5 to 69. And we have a hearing this morning, so I'd like to welcome everybody who's here for the chambers. And we have, with the officers, we have Roads and Environmental Health, and we're just going over to Lynn, who will explain the hearing procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The hearing will begin with the planning representatives giving an overview of the application. The objectors will present their objections to the committee, and members will have an opportunity to ask questions on the submissions made. Members, please note that this is not to be taken as an opportunity to comment on the merits or otherwise of the planning application. The applicant and their agent will then speak, and again, members will have an opportunity to ask questions. Again, members, please note that this is not to be taken as an opportunity to comment on the merits or otherwise of the planning application. At this stage, the hearing will close, and officers present will give appropriate clarification on any matters which have been raised during the hearing. Following this, the members will then move to determination. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn, and we're going to go straight over to Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The proposals before you seek planning permission for the erection of 39 houses. The site is allocated within the Local Development Plan 2017 as Site 257H for housing opportunity and was within the settlement boundary of Cross House. Located to the west of the village, the site is on the south side of the B7081 Irvine Road, with Home Farm to the immediate west. There are residential properties to the east of the site. Members had the opportunity of a site visit and attended the site visit this week with Marion as case officer and myself in attendance. The application proposes 39 units in a mix of 30 semi or detached units for mainstream houses for sale and 9 affordable units. The for sale houses are arranged throughout the site, notably except for the southeast portion, which is reserved for the affordable units. Further details start at paragraph 8 on page 6 of your report and explain the detail of the design, materials, proposed visibility displays, landscaping and public open space, together with a list of the reports and supporting information provided by the applicant. Members will note the noise report and odour assessment that is listed, and colleagues in environmental health are attending today if there are any queries on that matter. If I can now ask members to turn to the screens, I'll just share my screen with you, and hopefully we will be able to have a look at the proposals. Okay, members, hopefully everybody can see that okay. This is the B7081 along the north of the site. We have the red line boundary of the application site marked here. We have Home Farm here, and we have residential properties at Moat View and Carmel Place here. A little bit more details, members, for you. Just application plan provided by the applicant showing the red line site adjacent to next door properties. Here is the proposed site layout, members. You'll see Irvine Road to the north. You see Home Farm identified here, and you'll see the residential properties bounding the site. You'll see the access in at a fairly central point at the frontage of the site, and you'll see the loop road that travels round the site with the housing set around. Here in this corner here, members, is where the affordable houses are with the parking court that's referred to in the plans, and you'll see the recreation area that's also referred to in the plans down here at the southern area of the site. Here are some streetscape elevations, members, that you'll see. You'll see A to A, which is this elevation up here, and you'll just see that going through the site with B to B along here too. Some details of the housing styles for you, members, that we generally put up with housing type of applications. So just to show you the semi-detached units here. Detached unit here, members. Again, just some house type styles for you, members. Okay, just some elevation details for you, members. This is Irvine Road, looking back towards Cross House. Irvine Road looking in the other direction towards Springside. You'll see the very end of the settlement there with the national speed limit signs. Just a bit closer towards the speed limit signs for you there, members. Okay, that's Home Farm just at the back there, members. That's the hedge defining the application site. This is the 99 Irvine Road, members, with the hedge, and we looked at this area on site yesterday with visibility displays. This is looking across the site from the back of Moat View towards Home Farm, and that's Irvine Road just up at the boundary here. Again, just looking across the site. That's looking towards the south of the site, members, towards farmland beyond the site. And that's Moat View, members, as well. And that's from the gardens at Moat View looking across, and that's the one of the neighbouring properties at Moat View as well. Looking back towards Home Farm from Moat View. This is the last plan, members, for you, and it's a standard one that we put up showing you the crosshouse settlement boundary with the black thick line, and you can see the site in here within the settlement boundary, and you can see the kind of orangey colour, which is effectively the residential opportunity site. I'll just stop sharing my screen temporarily for members. If anybody wants to plan back up, please don't hesitate to let me know. Turning back to the report, in terms of consultations, as outlined in the report, we have no objections from consultees, starting at page 7 at paragraph 14, other than Environmental Health Service and Crosshouse Community Council. Both objections and details are outlined in the report in the representation and consultation sections. All other matters raised by consultees can be addressed by planning conditions or advisory notes if consent was to be granted. The response from Environmental Health is of particular significance in the application, and I can advise that Environmental Health offer their objections on the grounds of potential noise nuisance and likely impact on the proposed development from odour and potentially insect nuisance due to the close proximity of the existing farm. And Environmental Health are here today and will come in at the end of this presentation just to give you the detail of their objections, members. 50 parties have objected to the application, 46 from members of the public, 1 objection from an elected member, 1 objection from Crosshouse Community Council, 1 from Crosshouse Neighbours Placemaking Group, and 1 from the Adjacent Farm Partnership. No representation supporting the application have been received, and 1 comment was received. All points are outlined and responded to in the report, but in brief, the points note the following headings as outlined in your report. Proximity to neighbouring housing and home farm, slurry, septic tank, electricity supply, noise, smells and insects at from home farm, layout, design, proposed open space, privacy and overlooking, neighbouring uses and adjacent farmland, sightlines, visibility, flooding and surface water, gabion walls, existing gabion walls, wildlife and admin and legal issues. Turning to the position within the development plan, members will note that starting on page 36 at paragraph 153, there is an overview and context provided for your clarity. This context outlines the location of home farm at the western boundary, and at paragraph 155 that this has been a working dairy farm until some years ago, with information about working practices at the farm and the scale of operations, noting that whilst there may have been a reduction in the scale of farming, there remains a degree of farming carried out on the premises, with surrounding fields rented from another farmer, with bales evident, animals on site, cattle grazing fields in the summer and sheep in the winter. Clarification is also provided relative to a certificate of lawful use that was issued in 2020 for industrial use on the farm that's been established for more than 10 years. Paragraph 157 states the applicant's position, however, that home farm is no longer a working dairy farm referred to in previous earlier planning applications and associated business plan lodged at the time of one such application. Paragraph 158 notes the position of environmental health, and paragraphs 160 to 163 notes the planning service position for this application, that whilst home farm may not be of the size and scale as it was when it was a dairy farm, it's clear from mapping sources and site visits by council officers that farming still takes place. In terms of planning policy in the East Ayrshire Local Development Plan 2017, as a relevant part of the development plan, the planning services of the view that the application fails to comply with the following policies. Policy OP2 in terms of the landscape buffer, which could give rise to amenity issues between the existing farm and proposed housing, noting the agent of change principle. Policy Res 1 in terms of not demonstrating a good positive response to placemaking principles with regard to site layout and proximity to neighbouring houses, a lack of connected open space and the landscape buffer that I've referred to. Policy Res 3 does not provide, in terms of not providing the required amount of affordable housing on site, in that 9 are provided and the policy requires a provision of 10. Policy Res 11, in that it does not seek to protect and preserve and enhance the residential character and amenity of existing residential areas with regard to site layout in terms of proximity to houses at Motview and Crawford Hill Place, overlooking garden grounds and privacy of the site at the southeast. Policy INF4 with regard to quality of open space which isn't provided in a well-designed or connected format is not suitably located and accessible. Policy ENV12 for noise and air, failing to demonstrate that potential significant adverse noise and odour impacts from home farm have been suitably mitigated. Policy OP1 overarching in terms of criteria 1, which relates to the policies above, criteria 2 in terms of odour and noise, in terms of the lack of sufficient information and the lack of appropriate screening, criteria 3 in terms of layout and design, 5 in terms of design terms, 11 in terms of the requirements of environmental health, and 12 in terms of accessibility in the recreation area. Sections 25 and 37(2) of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act of 97 require that planning applications be determined in accordance with the development plan. Whilst the site is allocated for housing in the local development plan and the principle of development of this type of development is supported via the allocation, there are remaining issues that are unresolved relating to noise and odour, the affordable housing, the landscape buffer, the larger area of recreational open space in terms of it not being well designed and is located in terms of usability and accessibility, some concerns over privacy and overlooking at garden grounds to the southeast. The objections do raise material matters that haven't been fully resolved or mitigated by revised site layouts, and there is an unresolved objections from environmental health as a consultee. In terms of noise, the agent of change principle is now contained in legislation and is not considered to have been met in relation to existing noise and possible future noise at home farm and the potential effects this may have in the new houses. With regard to SPP and the LDP 2017 being out of date, the question of whether the proposal can be considered as a sustainable development has been assessed and the location is agreed as sustainable within the settlement boundary. In detail, the proposals do not sufficiently mitigate for noise and odour, and in this regard, it's not considered the layout can be deemed as sustainable. It's considered that the proposal on the whole does not fully comply with the provisions of the development plan, material considerations are not overall supported, and the application is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons listed in Appendix 1 of the report, starting at page 65. Just before I pass back to the Chair for the hearing process, if I can pass to Bill Gilchrist from Environmental Health just to summarise the environmental health position. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona. Just by way of introduction, my name is Bill Gilchrist. I'm the team leader for pollution control and the corporate enforcement unit within the Environmental Health Service. The Environmental Health Service would wish to object to this application on the grounds of unacceptable impacts on the development site once properties are occupied and potentially odour and insect infestation arising from activities at home farm. It's the view of the service that these impacts have not been sufficiently addressed by the applicant. This view is reached due to the following. Given the location of the proposed development, a visit was made to the area on 19th of October 2022 by 2 officers from the Environmental Health Service. Should the members have any query in relation to this visit, both officers are in attendance today. This visit was not pre-arranged. However, the officers were permitted access to the farm and were advised that cattle and horses were due to the farm from summer grazing in the early part of November 2022. During the walk-around, it was noticed that a generator was in operation and created audible noise. And in addition, poultry such as ducks and geese were present in a fenced enclosure at the back of the farm. This fenced enclosure is in close proximity to the proposed development site. A response was submitted to the Planning Service on 28th of October 2022, indicating that assessments carried out in support of the application were not a true representation of the conditions in which the proposed development would be sited beside, i.e. the assessments were not carried out at a time of year when livestock would be present on the farm in any numbers. This response also indicated that a number of small businesses were operating from the farm buildings, and Fiona has already referenced this, and that certificate of lawfulness for Class 5 industrial use in Building 9 within home farms was approved on 5th June 2020. That workshop is currently being used as a joinery workshop for the construction and maintenance of staircases and contains a number of heavy items of woodworking machinery. Also during that visit, it was noted that noise was audible from a generator and poultry again were present on the farm. Officers also noted the presence of a large midden in close proximity to the development site, though no odour was present at the time of that visit. A further visit to the farm was carried out again by the same 2 officers on the 7th of November 2022. However, as this was not a pre-arranged visit, no access to the farm was gained at that time. A third visit was, however, carried out on the 22nd of November 2022. This was pre-arranged by the farmer via email. On this occasion, 2 tractors were on site and these were generating a significant level of noise. Livestock at that time present were 10 adult cattle, 4 calves and 9 horses. However, officers did not at that time witness any significant noise from that livestock. The weather conditions at the time of the visit were dry and sunny with no strong winds and no odour, as I say, was present from the midden. However, in order to best inform the committee, a further visit was carried out yesterday by myself and the same 2 officers. This was pre-arranged only by contacting the farmer whilst we were en route to the premises. At this time, 12 pedigree Shetland cattle were in sight, 4 of which were in calf. 9 horses were housed in the shed closest to the development site, and a number of ducks were contained within a netted structure at the southern end of the farm. At the time of the visit, loud machinery noise was evident from 2 items of plant, a tractor and a silage bale shifter. There was also some noise from the cattle, which were contained in a pen at the northernmost part of the farm, in close proximity to the development site. There was a strong odour present from the manure in the midden, despite the day being very windy. The wind was blowing any odour towards the development site, and in our opinion, that would obviously give rise to potential complaints of nuisance. Also during this visit, it was ascertained during discussions with the farmer that at present the midden is holding approximately 1,500 tonnes of manure. The farm has capacity in its cubicle housing for up to 170 head of cattle, and the underground slurry storage tank has a capacity to hold up to 1 million litres of slurry. All of these can generate significant level of odour. It was also noted that the layout of the proposed site would impact on the pipeline taking domestic sewage and grey water to the septic tank, and thereafter also impact on the liquor percolation system from the drainage drainage from the tank. There is a field drainage system which lies to the south of the septic tank, and the outflow from the septic tank connects into that for final dispersal into the subsoil. This drainage runs southward into a field drainage system, and as I say, and this would actually be impacted by any construction work and would potentially be interfered with. It is also noted that there's a proposal to erect an acoustic fence on the side of the development facing Irvine Road, and also to install trickle vents at the properties most likely to be impacted by road traffic noise. This is referenced in the Noise Impact Assessment Report 156-961-337/RMG/R1 dated 13th of September 2022 at paragraphs 8.4 and 8.5 and 8.7 in relation to trickle vents. Whilst this addresses the mitigation measures required in terms of control of road traffic noise, it does not address the potential for noise impacts from Holmes Farm. It is, however, acknowledged that there is a proposal to erect a 3-metre high acoustic fence to reduce noise impacts on those plots most likely to be impacted by noise from the farm. However, as the Noise Impact Assessment Report indicates at paragraph 8.8, it was not possible to conduct a noise impact assessment of noise from the farm due to inactivity at the time of the noise survey being conducted. Therefore, in the opinion of the Environmental Health Service, it cannot be determined with any accuracy what the noise impacts on affected properties will be during the most active months in the farm, nor how effective this barrier will be in reducing impacts to an acceptable level, or indeed to indicate what, if any, other mitigation measures will be required in addition to the fence. Therefore, this again does not accurately reflect potential circumstances at the development site at those time of year when activity as a farm is, as I say, likely to be at its height. Additionally, the land to the south of the development site is grazing land in other ownership, which could potentially also contribute towards noise and odour impacts. It should be noted that also that there is a proposal, we understand, to create a 3-metre wide planted barrier at the eastmost part of the site at near plots 37 to 39. However, this will prevent access to a shed structure for maintenance purposes. In conclusion, taking into account the above, it remains the position of the Environmental Health Service that as the farm is in operation and has sufficient buildings to enable it to continue to do so, we would wish to maintain our objection to the proposal until such times as the applicant can address the service's concerns. I'm quite happy to take any questions on that.
Just to remind you, we can't actually take questions just now because there's going to be a hearing procedure. Okay, thank you. And thank you very much.
Apologies, Chair.
Thank you for those reports. We're now going straight into the hearing, and I think it's been discussed. We're planning to give the objectors 5 minutes each to speak, and I believe there's 5 objectors.
Through you, Chair, we have 6 members. We have six objectors speaking this morning, so they will collectively receive 30 minutes, which does work out as 5 minutes each, which they have agreed to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just so you know, we will not cut you off if you are mid-sentence. We will allow you to finish your sentence. Okay. So if the first is Greta Roberts. Greta, if you'd like to, you know the drill, go to a microphone. Thank you very much. And you have 5 minutes.
Good morning. You've been presented with a most thorough planning report detailing a huge number of objections to this development. I congratulate Marion for this. 65 pages of report is somewhat daunting, but I direct you to the end of it, where 7 sound reasons for refusal are listed. I agree with them all. Number 7 on the second page of this is reason number 7. The overarching policy OP1 covers many of the other specific local plan and government policy failings in the current application, so I won't waste time listing these. Policy OP1 is failed due to lack of recognition of surrounding residential and agricultural uses, the need for space in between these and the number of houses now proposed. There's been no attempt to provide appropriate landscape buffers, just inadequate plans to place as many houses as possible, leaving unusable land at the bottom end for recreation, perhaps even paddling in a flood risk zone. Local residents will speak to these problems. They are evident on all 4 sides of this application site. 1. On the north side of the site is the proposed access onto the busy road to Cross House. It's currently bounded by a high hedge on top of an old wall in places. Proposed sight lines fail the test of forward visibility near the road bend to the west. If they'd been marked out for any site visit, this would have been apparent. 2. On the east side of the site, the relationship to homes and gardens in Moat View and Crawford Hill Place would present maintenance and structural problems, in addition to reducing existing residents' privacy and amenity. On the south end of the site, which I would classify as space left over after planning, as the developers couldn't risk building there, it seems it is good enough for recreation, despite being remote for children in most houses. No play areas, difficult slopes, but with the dangerous attraction of water during flooding from the Carmel water. It will require robust boundary treatment when bounded by a field where animals could graze, and deer have been seen too. Fourthly, the boundary to the west includes another field requiring robust boundary treatment and space between any housing. Home Farm to the west has particular problems, which the last speaker, Frank Smith, will speak to. In one of my objections for over 2 years, I referred to a planning appeal at Tower Hill Farm, Kilmore, some years ago, when agricultural sheds were proposed near an established housing development at Tower Hill Avenue. This is where the reporter concluded that he could not comprehend why some houses had been allowed to encroach so remarkably close to farm operations. This application site has been identified for housing, but the current plans should be refused, with hopefully a revised layout for fewer houses, respecting all surrounding land uses and the need to produce a development which can contribute to good placemaking at this gateway site into Cross House. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite James Kurth now. Thank you, Greta. The same 5 minutes, thank you.
Morning. I speak as a representative of Cross House Community Council, and I've lived in the village all my life, 60 years plus to be exact, and during that time I've seen a lot of change from an almost rural environment to becoming much more suburban. Cross House Community Council wish to see Cross House continue to be a safe and pleasant place to live and bring up our children, not just for existing residents, but those who may wish to relocate and purchase a house in a new development. But housing, to us, must be planned right. We as a community council have an obligation to our residents, existing and future incoming, to see that any new housing developments are fit for purpose. We're not trying to stop residential building on the site per se, but we require Dawn Homes to do things properly, taking into account all relevant policy, advice and guidance, and in turn engage in a meaningful placemaking practice with the local community and its residents. It's a very important issue for us to deal with within the village, and we must always be ready to make and take the time to hear our residents' concerns and help ensure their voices are heard as part of a democratic planning process. The objections raised highlight the material concern which affect the amenities and safety of Cross House, existing and future residents, and those passing through the village and the pavements and roads. These fall into the areas listed in the Community Council Good Practice Guidance, as per page 56, as being completely legitimate areas of concern, and we are responsible for that and must follow that to the letter. Also, having visited the site myself on a number of occasions and know the area extremely well from walking through it on a number of occasions throughout the course of a week, we wish to emphasise points to do with flooding, road access, unsafe play area and insufficient amenity space in those plans. Therefore, Cross House Community Council wish to note their objection to the proposals on a number of grounds. Access and full visibility displays in both directions should be pegged out. Also, the 2-metre path and 30 mile per hour zone should be clearly marked on the ground. All farm hedge and bales block the visibility displays and view of pedestrians on the new path. Pegging, marking out will clearly demonstrate this on the ground. There are vital road user and pedestrian safety issues. Neighbours at 99 Urban Road insist that their hedge will not be removed. Their hedge also blocks the visibility display to the east. The play area has been removed, may well be put back in, but it needs to be reinstated in the part of the site outside the flood zone and not in a minus 60 degree slope. The wind dust path to the recreation amenity space is inaccessible to wheelchair users and people with prams. Having walked that area, I can completely verify that. Situated in a 1 and 3 gradient slope or on the bottom part of an area that floods. Christchurch Community Council also objected to the noise and odour reports, which were taken in times when cattle and horses were at summer grazing and do not clearly reflect the neighbours' experience of living next to the farm, such as the noises, the farm machinery, the cattle, the strong unpleasant smells and the flies. Planning Committee needed a site visit to see the pegged out access area and full visibility displays mapped out in the new path in the 30-mile zone. The proximity of moat view supporting walls through the planned excavation. The proximity of many plots to the home farm, livestock sheds, slurry storage, farm mudding and industrial shed. We believe as a group that we must maintain or indeed observe all those problems and that they are due to an overdevelopment of the site. The LDP recommends 30 houses. The developers are trying to squeeze in 39. So are building too close to the farm, and we believe they're cutting commerce with safe play and recreation space, shoving it into a flood zone and an unsuitable slope, squeezing block design affordable houses too close to remote view. In the process, we think they're flouting many LDP rules and regulations, and we as a community council have an obligation to our residents existing and future incoming to see that any new housing development is fit for purpose. As I said, we're not trying to stop residential building on the site per se, but we require Don Homes to do the right thing. That is our objection. Thank you. I'll take the time to hear back.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, James. Like to invite Fiona Evans, please, and I understand there's some photographs to go with this that we're going to share on screen. Just give us a minute, Fiona. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Fiona Evans. I live at Holmes Farm and I'm a member of the Cross House Neighbours Placemaking Group. Thanks to the Planning Department for such a detailed report, and we agree with its recommendation for refusal. The Placemaking Group have raised many issues through the planning process, particularly to do with the dangerous roads access design. We are concerned that they haven't been addressed in Ayrshire Roads Alliance traffic consultation. The proposed access is on a speedy stretch of road with a blind bend, yet a speed survey report has not been published. Ayrshire Roads Alliance consultation specified only 30 mile/an-hour speed limit goes only along the front of the site. This means that vehicles in the 60 mile/an-hour zone meet the pedestrians stepping out from a new path. These pedestrians will be hidden behind the farm hedge and huge stack of bales at Holmes Farm, and I think there's a photo to go with that. There have been many accidents in recent years in both the 60 mile/an-hour zone and the 30 mile/an-hour zone. Speeding cars have smashed into the barber's shop and the spa. A car careered into another vehicle outside the chip shop, blocking off the centre of the village and bus and emergency service routes. And I recall a child being knocked down a few years ago. I have a statement from our neighbour and fellow group member, William Duncan, who unfortunately couldn't get time off work at such short notice. I have lived in Cross House for over 35 years, 22 of these on Irving Road. The proposed access to this development is directly opposite my family home. Cars, ambulances, motorbikes, buses, trucks speed in and out of the village all the time. Drivers do not adhere to the 30-mile-an-hour zone when they're exiting the village or to the countdown markers entering the village. Since lockdown, cyclists use the road more often. I see drivers overtaking slow pedalling bikes on the hill, risking head-on collisions with oncoming traffic. The position of this new access with its minimal visibility displays will make matters worse. There are safer established access at Holmes Farm that was granted planning permission in principle for housing. This required a 30-mile-an-hour zone being moved and 160-metre visibility display to the west. Why should this new site with even more houses be any different? There isn't even a sitting off area for eastbound vehicles turning into the site. Cars will queue standing still in the 60-mile-an-hour zone. If this development is allowed to go ahead as is, it is an accident waiting to happen. Someone will be killed on this road. And that's from William. The neighbours have been so concerned about potential accidents that I submitted a Freedom of Information request, and East Ayrshire Council provided provided information, and it showed that 3 Ayrshire Roads Alliance staff have major concerns about the road and pedestrian access to this development. ARA even suggested a realignment of the B7081 to the west of the site along the frontage of Holmes Farm, commenting, "I appreciate site 257H is in the local development plan and therefore the principle of development should be possible. However, that does not then imply that East Ayrshire Council and Ayrshire Roads Alliance in particular should then throw good and safe design practices out of the window to allow the developer to realise completion of the project as easily and as painlessly as possible, thus maximising their profit at the expense of road safety and common sense. Dawn Homes may choose to put profits before people, but committee members, today you have a choice. These designs do not comply with the development plan. They do not comply with the national planning guidelines. They do not comply with placemaking principles. The people of Kilmarnock deserve better. The people of Cross House deserve better. The Neighbours Placemaking Group, thank you for listening. We agree with the planning report that this application be offered for rejection. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any questions from members? Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite Mr. Lee Morrison. And the same again.
Good morning. I'm Lee Morrison and I live at Moatview. I'm speaking on behalf of the neighbours of Moatview who share the boundary to the eastern part of the site. We'd like to raise our concerns over the layout and overdevelopment of this eastern part of the site that borders Moatview and Crawford Hill Place. This particular part of the site looks as if it's been designed as an afterthought. Because of flooding on the south of the site, meaning that that particular part of the land can't be built on, this has actually moved the plots of the site further north, resulting in the close proximity of new plots to the surrounding houses of Moatview and Crawford Hill Place. On this eastern part of the site, there's allocation for 9 affordable housing plots. They've all been shoehorned into this narrow and awkward part of the site, which has raised concerns for us with regards to the amount of people that will be required to live in this one part of the site. With regards to this part of the site that I said was narrow and awkward, it appears that the 9 plots have been difficult to put them into this part of the site. I make reference to a block of 5 terrace-style houses, and would like to echo the comments in the committee report that the affordable housing should be indistinguishable from the other plots on the site. We believe that in the case of the terrace-style housing, this doesn't comply. The 9 plots are positioned in close proximity to each other and in such close proximity to the neighbours of Montview and Crawford Hill Place that it's actually led to non-compliances with the planning, some of the non-compliances to the planning policies, and this was due to overlooking issues. We've raised a number of objections regarding the loss of privacy to our living spaces and garden spaces. Some of the 9 plots in this particular part of the site have been positioned within such close proximity that we make reference to some of the measurements in the committee report. There's measurements of 7 and 8 metres, and these measurements are from actual garden plots on the new site, and these are to actual living spaces of the existing houses. Obviously, with measurements like these, there's always going to be the issues of overlooking and loss of privacy. In the case of Montview, the overlooking issues are only made worse due to the rear gardens of Montview that have been raised by nearly 2 metres in some cases by the use of gabion walls. The sheer difference in site levels at this part of the site means that normal sized fences has been deemed not enough to stop the overlooking and loss of privacy issues. And if there was fences used at this particular part of the site that are any greater in height, would be considered as a barricade around the new and existing properties, and no one wants to be subjected to those living conditions. We'd also like to raise our concerns regarding our gabion walls. There's a proposal of a 1 metre maintenance strip, which we believe is an inadequate amount of space to carry out any sort of repairs to these walls. With walls that are in close to 2 metres in height, we would expect to be able to use a digger to maintain these walls and the foundations, which obviously clearly isn't going to be possible with a 1 metre access strip. We just want to raise our concerns that there could be damage to these walls even after the development site has been and gone, and this could cause potential issues for the affordable living plots that are in close proximity to Montview and Crawford Hill Place. We just feel that the access could be sorted out just now and resolve any issues further down the line. Because of factors on the site like flooding and road noise, it's concentrated the layout of the plots on the site. We believe that this is what's causing the overlooking and loss of privacy issues. The concentration of the plots on the site has meant that landscape buffers from farm buildings and neighbouring properties have been omitted, and as a result has led to the potential odour and insect issues. We'd like to reiterate from the committee report that the design and layout of the site would not be able to coexist with the surrounding area. I'd just like to note, as a father of 2 young kids, I'm disappointed to see the removal of the play park due to the unsuitability of the amenity spaces on the site. And I'd just like to finish that even though this site is part of the local development plan, because there's so many non-compliances to the policies, a substandard site design should be held accountable, ensuring that Cross House remains an inviting place to live.
Thank you very much. I'd like to put your microphone off, please. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Members? Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to invite Janice McPherson, please. And understand there's some photographs will be shared on screen. Thank you.
Hello, I am the owner of 5 Crawford Hill Place, which is situated right in the south of the proposed site. Our property is split level, similar to Moat View. Our house sits at road level, and the beginning of our garden sits at road level, but the bottom of our garden sits at field level. The level of the proposed housing for the affordable housing will be 4 metres below my actual property baseline. And the suggestion in the report of a 3-metre boundary fence is not only unviable, but will be pointless, as the 3-metre fence will still sit below my house baseline, opening my whole house up to full view from the site, the exact same as Moat View. I note that my house is in the closest proximity to any of the proposed new affordable housing, though I argue that the 7 metres stated between my property and the closest house is incorrect, as the boundary line in the plans has been placed inside my boundary, making it realistically only approximately 4 metres, showing that these plans do not actually fit. My living room window will be at eye level directly into bedrooms of 5 houses, and I'll be looking directly down into their gardens with no fencing or buffers, giving both them and myself absolutely no privacy. The highest density of homes is being squashed into the smallest proportion of the site and going against government guidelines of spreading affordable houses throughout the site to ensure the dignity and inclusion of all residents. The reasoning of easier management for the factors of these affordable housings is just not acceptable. It's not acceptable to segregate these tenants into a cramped area away from other homes and goes against government guidance. As a resident, I must argue that reports completed are not a true representation of the site that we live in throughout each season. Flooding reports do not consider the topography of the wider neighbourhood, and this has a huge impact on the surface water levels. Living as the house directly in line with the Irvine Main Road, we constantly receive volumes of surface water that floods down from Fisher Way, which sits approximately 30 metres higher than this site. We have had to replace our lawn twice in 5 years due to surface water and flooding, and which the water then feeds into the field behind onto the site. The 2 drains currently in front of our property have sunk due to excess water levels, and this is causing street flooding at Crawford Hill Place, which is over 4 metres higher than the site. We view major flooding throughout the year and not just in the winter months. Summer months can be very dangerous, especially after hot, dry weather. All current residents witness flooding many feet deep at the lowest level of this site, with water pooling in under 30 minutes after a heavy rainfall. I also noticed we have now introduced 2 90-degree angled pipes into the flood zone to deal with surface water. These sharp angles will minimise the pipe's ability to clear water sufficiently to keep this area safe and flood-free. Recent news across the world has seen flooding, and it has happened in Scotland over the last few weeks and months. And I note that at First Minister's question time, only this week, they are now looking to put a special task force in to address the increasing floods being seen in residential areas. And they note that this is because of deforestation, removal of natural hedgerows, new builds being sited in flood zones, close to rivers or natural burns. And I'm sure this new committee would be very interested in the proposed ill-formed development in its current form. The recreation area is sited at the deepest flooding zone, where the initial play park was supposed to be sited. After much toing and froing, plan changes, seeing a play park that is inaccessible to prams and wheelchair users, steps, then no steps, steep paths, 60-degree inclines and wind paths. I now note the path has completely disappeared from the plans. This is unacceptable. Children have a right to safe and adequate play areas. The government guidance and expectations around the obesity and recreation is totally ignored in this site. As a family housing estate, having no designated play area and the nearest play area in the village being nearly 1 mile away from this site and would only be able to be accessed via a main road with questionable visibility displays, these children will still be children and find themselves straying into an area close to the river, known for quick flooding. And due to the speed of rising waters we see throughout the year, these children could find themselves trapped by surrounded waters within 15 to 20 minutes with no route to exit. Or they may head towards an interesting area that would be the farm, raising further concerns for their safety. They have a right to play and they'll find a way to do it. I am also concerned about the ecology report that is now saying there is no significant wildlife. Again, as a resident who sees on a daily basis throughout all 4 seasons, I will argue that this report is not true or accurate. I regularly watch deers crossing the site early in the morning. Pairs of protected level 4 goshawks come into my garden every autumn and winter. There's an abundance of magpies, herring gulls, squirrels, foxes, and not forgetting the frogs and toads that, when the river floods, make their way into my garden pond, and we regularly collect buckets of them and return them to the river, showing just how far up these flood waters are actually coming. They're coming right across the whole site. I feel the proposal in their current form are ill-planned, ill-conceived, and are shoehorning 39 homes into the site that only has outline planning consent for 30 homes, showing that the developers are continuing to put profit over people. I uphold the report's rejection of this plan in its current form.
Thank you very much. And once again, members, are there any questions? Thank you. I'd like to call Mr. Frank Smith, please. And again, Mr. Smith, 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. I've lived at Holmes Farm all of my life. We have a herd of heritage beef cattle and some poultry, all of which are on the Rare Breed Survival Trust watch list. We breed thoroughbred horses for the racing industry and make round bales for ongoing contracts plus contract baling. The report lists the farm as a small holding. This is not accurate. The farm would not qualify because we are currently farming too many acres. Also, the farm has enough accommodation for 170 cattle, 1 million litres of slurry and 1,500 tonnes of farmyard manure. This is not a small holding. There is a certificate of lawfulness for Class 5 industrial use in the shed right beside the development. I want to make it clear I am not against the principle of housing. In fact, I spent 18 months participating in the local development plan ratified in 2017. Don Homes are simply choosing to ignore the LDP recommendations. A unified approach for the western boundary. This was agreed by East Ayrshire Council, Nature Scott, as part of the LDP consultation process. This was decided after discussions with the Planning and Policy Department about the location of the farm and the potential impact on a new development. We invited Don Homes to an early discussion after gaining planning in principle for housing. Don Homes have absolutely no interest in participating in a unified approach to the western boundary. Subsequently, the LDP would require a suitable landscape boundary between Holmes Farm and the proposed housing development. Don Homes' initial plans shows gardens backing up to my farm sheds. Apparently, gardens are suitable to keep out smells, insects and noise from the farm. The previous planning application for change of use in 2016 and business plan was used as justification for the noise report. This is out of date. The planning application was refused, so the business plan was never implemented in full. When Don Homes submitted this application, it did not take into account the Class 5 certificate of lawfulness, the status of the farm. This information was freely available on the East Ayrshire planning portal, and the farm can be found through rural payments. Instead, a year and a half later, they selectively used an out-of-date information and deliberately played down the adjacent land uses. It is an insult to the planning system. The farm was registered and cattle were on site when Don Homes submitted this application. They've had plenty of time to assess the impacts. The noise survey was taken on a Friday by Bureau Veritas. I was not at home as I had to be in Aberdeen for a study weekend. I'm doing a Masters in Organic Farming. Fiona explained to the surveyor that I was away. He said because this would only be a baseline, he would need to inform his client another survey would need to be done. No survey has ever turned up. The current land use at the farm is agricultural, so the planning application does not meet LDP policies and planning guidelines. A new and correct assessment of the farm noise, smells and insects need done over the full year so that proper mitigations can be implemented. Thirdly, the recommendations for 30 houses, the extra 9 is an overdevelopment. They should be removed to provide a buffer zone. Listening to Greta's quote from the reporter about Tour Hill Farm and Comores, it seems to me that we are on the verge of repeating the same mistakes again. The proximity of the houses and lack of play area will encourage children into the farm. A farm is not an activity playground. We have beef cattle. Cows can be very protective of their calves, and the breed standard states that cattle retain their horns. The sheds could be a very dangerous place for anyone not familiar with animals. Our septic tank is located in the field and has legal protection. This has been pointed out by my solicitor. I understand that the planning office do not get involved with legal ramifications. However, I'm concerned that Don Holmes will simply rip it up and say, oops, the digger driver did it. The tank itself will protrude 1 metre above ground according to the levels plans. These current plans will render my home uninhabitable when the foundations are cleared for the retaining walls. This will dig up the 3-phase electricity cable and the supply pipe from my house to the septic tank. Also, my garden hedge will be completely destroyed. The 3-metre buffer zone around the shed is a joke. New residents need a substantial landscape buffer with mature trees, and I need a clear access strip of 3 metres wide. This cannot be planted with trees. The 3-metre acoustic barrier sited next to the metal-sided shed will amplify the noise made by the cattle and horses. The B7081 is a fast and dangerous road. Don Holmes' own plans show that sightlines cannot be achieved, and the visibility from the proposed 2-metre path will be obscured by the hedge at Holmes Farm. I have gone to great efforts to show this to ARA. There has been no response regarding my concerns. ARA have made no official comment on this, but I am relieved to see that the planning office are recommending the entrance is demonstrated by pegging out the visibility displays. This should have been done before today and not consigned to a condition that may never be implemented. An independent surveyor should also be present to ensure the proper displays are demonstrated. No speed survey has ever been released to show the traffic speeds. This is usually a basic requirement. The planning application for planning in principle at Holmes Farm requires a 160-metre visibility display to the west. This is not happening with the site in question. Don Holmes are saying 90 by 90 is suitable. How can this be on the exact same section of road? There is no reason to compromise road safety, the amenity, health and safety of new and existing residents. To reiterate, I cannot see any reason why a design solution that has proper placemaking principles at its heart cannot be achieved between Moatview, myself and Don Holmes. I agree with the planning report and ask for the refusal of this current application, and I would like to thank the Planning Office for their comprehensive report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Nope. Okay, thank you. Okay, and I'd like to thank you all for staying within time. I'd like to now invite the applicants from Don Holmes, and you will have 15 minutes, gentlemen. And that's Mr. Jim Raby and Mr. Graham Patrick. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name's Jim Raby. I'm the Land and Planning Manager for the Springfield Properties Group, of which Don Holmes is a subsidiary. I'd like to thank the Chair and members of the East Ayrshire Council Planning Committee for the opportunity to speak in support of our proposals at Cross House. As a background, Don Holmes have extensive development experience throughout the Ayrshire housing market area, and the application at Cross House will present Don Holmes an opportunity to re-establish house building presence in East Ayrshire. The proposed 39 houses has been fully developed by an experienced design team with careful consideration as how the development will integrate into the existing settlement of Cross House and how the new development will be perceived as a new edge of settlement. The site at Cross House has been designed as a cohesive housing development which will provide a high quality residential environment and, in conjunction with both private and affordable house types, will establish an eclectic choice of housing in a sustainable location. The design and access statement submitted there with the application demonstrates this. Furthermore, we have worked closely with the Planning Department over a period of 18 to 20 months, and we understand the final layout today was considered by officers in consultation with the policy team, which did meet the requirements of the East Ayrshire Local Development Plan. It is therefore disappointing that we are here today with a recommendation for refusal. The proposal includes a range of dwellings incorporated 2 and 3 bedroom terraces in the affordable provision and 3 and 4 bedroom semi-detached and detached villas. We have worked closely with the council officers and have acknowledged the concerns of local residents to reflect a layout and housing mix that has acknowledged the local impacts, and where possible, steps have been taken to address these. It is noted that the council have expressed concerns over the potential proximity of the adjacent building to the development proposals. We have noted these concerns and commissioned independent noise and air quality odour reports, which provided empirical evidence that the amenity across the site would not be impacted once the development had been realised. Environmental health officers initially raised no objections to the application on 13th of April 2022, some 12 months after the application had been submitted, providing a full year for this department to consider and address the proposals with potential impacts from the adjacent land. A subsequent update from the Head of Environmental Health dated 4th of May 2022 first raised the potential issues of odour and noise. Since the receipt of this objection, we have commissioned an environmental noise and odour impact assessment, and this was submitted as a background paper to the consideration. A further consultation from Environmental Health dated 26th of October 22 recommended refusal on grounds of sufficient information, however, did acknowledge that whilst on the site visit, of which there was no date attached, they could detect no odour despite the presence of a large midden within the farmstead and close proximity to the application site. The circumstances of the independent expert reports prepared by Buenos Veritas founded at the time of the assessments when they were undertaken that there were no animals present in the adjacent buildings. However, there has been no evidence to suggest that would there be an impact on the proposed site to the extent that the refusal of planning permission is justified. A number of issues have been raised within the committee report, and the reasons for refusal in terms of design and layout of the development proposal. However, over the past 20 months, we have cooperated fully with the planning case officer to identify policy deficient areas of the original submission and have evolved a design that we believed would provide a satisfactory development. Changes were made to the layout in response to design issues raised by the officers, and the policy consultation response dated the 25th of October 2022. The responding policy officer was able to conclude that the proposal now complies with policies OP1, OP2, Res 3, Res 11 and 4 of the East Ayrshire LDP, contrary to the reasons set out in the committee report. We did note on the Council Planning webpage under Planning Consultations, and I'll quote here, "The determination of a planning application shall be in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. This approach ensures that the decision-making simply does not adhere to policy provisions, but that where there are material considerations of sufficient importance, these may weigh out the terms of the development plan." Material considerations will include the responses received by the Planning Authority, having consulted external agencies, internal and external to the Council, that can bring relevant expertise to bear in relation to the circumstances and nature of the development. It's clear from the reasons for refusal in the committee report that the policy consultation response, which does support the proposals and confirms its compliance with the LDP, has been dismissed, and an alternative view which contradicts the published consultation response. We just note that the site is included in the current local development plan as having potential to accommodate housing development subject to issues identified in the environmental report. And the site is included in the most up-to-date East Ayrshire housing land supply as an effective site with the ability and site capacity of 39 to be delivered over the period 2023-2024. The LDP environmental report assessed the site and only identified flooding to the southern part of the site as an issue which we have addressed through a comprehensive flood risk assessment report in support of our application. Both SEPA and the Ayrshire Roads Alliance Flood Management Officer have raised no objection in respect to this potential constraint. Significantly, when the site was allocated, there were no issues identifying potential amenity impacts from the adjacent land and buildings. It is further noted that the Council's housing land audit refers to landscape mitigation. In this respect, we would consider the finer details of the landscape buffer shown in the submitted layout could be achieved through the imposition of a suitable planning condition. In response to the 7 reasons for refusal set out in the committee report, we would reiterate that the internal consultations response from the Planning Policy Officer does support the development based upon OP2, Res 1, Res 3, Res 11 and 4, OP1 Parts 1, 2, 3, 5, 11 and 12, and SPP and NP4. In respect to reason 6 of the noise and air ENV 12, the evidence provided by the applicant in response to independent reports has not been justified in the reason for refusal on the policy. Indeed, the reason only suggests that the noise and odour may result in injurious amenity impacts, and in our opinion should not form the basis for a refusal. We therefore expect that the committee members look favourably on our approval proposals and approve our application.
Yes, sorry. In addition, I would like to just make the point that it's quite clear from the Planning Committee report that the policy consultation document, which is on the Council's website, is not even listed as being considered in the Case Officer's Planning Committee report. And I consider this to be a significant omission in the way that this application has been presented to the committee today. The committee report, which has been referred to by Mr. Ravey in his presentation, clearly concludes that the proposal met with all of the local plan policies, which are now cited in the reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Does any questions for members? No questions, thank you very much. None online. I'd like to thank everybody. That's the hearing now closed. You'll just bear with us 1 second, thank you. Okay, Fiona, would you like to another minute for your response? Yes, just it will be a few seconds yet, thank you.
Apologies. Thanks very much there, Chair. I don't have a great amount to come back to you on, members. I do have a couple of points just to make. Mr Kirk raised the point about the visibility displays, etc., and a few of the other objectors did as well. Just to clarify, page 10 of your papers, members, we do have if the application was to be approved, we do have the use of the negative suspensive planning condition, which is informally always referred to as a Grampian condition. And we do feel that that would be appropriate to use in this case to clarify the site, the visibility displays for the site in front of 99 Irvine Road. And that basically says that before you do anything, the condition would effectively say that before you do anything else on site, you need to ensure that you can attain the visibility displays. If you can't attain the visibility displays, our contention therefore that the consent would not be implementable. Now that is a general accepted practice. It is in case law, and we do feel that that approach would be appropriate should members decide that they wanted to grant the application today. There was reference also made, I think, by Mr Kirk and possibly some of the other objections about the site visit. Just to clarify that we did attend a site visit. We parked the vehicles in the public road network on Moat View. We looked at the site from across the site from one of the residential gardens in Moat View, because that was the easiest way to see across the site. And then we walked along Irvine Road. We viewed the farm from the public road. On the way back, we stopped and we looked at the hedging for the sight lines at 99 Irvine Road. And I just wanted to clarify the route of the site visit in case that was useful for anybody there. And obviously members who were there will be aware of what we did as well. The local development plan as adopted has an indicative capacity of 30 units. That is indicative, and it is identifying the site as a housing opportunity site. It's not planning permission in principle, but it is an indicative capacity that we have given it. I note a lot of the objectors talked about ARA matters, and I'll bring ARA back in terms of traffic, etc. if there's anything else you want to add. Running through pages of notes here, members. In terms of the applicant, Mr Ravey referred to LDP2 with an indicative capacity of 39 units. LDP2, we have got objections to the site, members, so obviously we are not taking that into account because that has to go through due process. Mr Patrick also referred to the Planning Committee report having a significant omission regarding the policy response, which wasn't listed. It is on our website. The policy response does not give a clean approval for the site. It is dependent on certain matters such as supporting information, such as other information, such as noise and odour reports. It is not a clean cut. This is absolutely definitely appropriate for approval. I also wanted just to point out our practice. We do consult our colleagues in policy for use for internal discussion. We don't list their comments verbatim in the report. They are used to help inform our evaluation of the application, and they're used to help inform the development plan summary that you have in your papers too. I therefore don't agree that it's a significant omission. I'm happy to clarify any other matters for members. I've got Marion, the case officer, here. I'm not sure if Marion wants to come in and say anything else before I pass over to colleagues in Environmental Health and ARA. But just in case Marion wants to clarify anything, I'll give her the opportunity to do so.
No, nothing especially, Chair, but just to say, to reiterate what Fiona said, the development plan response, you'll find it in every planning application, whether it's delegated, if it's required, or whether it's a committee matter. And it's not that they are a consultee, it's just informal advice from our colleagues in the development plan team. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to go over to ARA for a response.
Thanks, Chair. Fiona's addressed the concerns around the sightline issues, which have been addressed through the planning process. The wider traffic impact issues were also assessed during the planning process, and our officers deemed that the access arrangements were approved on the basis and subject to the condition that the existing 30 mile per hour zone was extended along the entire length of the frontage of the site. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I would just like to ask if legal would want to come in at this point, perhaps to explain the Grampian Regional Council situation and the negative suspense planning condition. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Good morning. Apologies to members and participants. I couldn't be in the chamber for this one. That had been my intention, but for domestic reasons, I'm having to do the Teams, but at least thankfully Teams has worked. Just to keep us focused on the issues, what I would say is that specifically, Chair, in relation to the roads issue, it's not a position I particularly like from a legal perspective, but it is as is set out in the report. If sight lines and visibility displays can be physically achieved on a layout at a site, a location, then that's the focus. Can they be physically achieved? But that doesn't take account in terms of the planning system and the granting decision of ownership and the legal and commercial ability to achieve them. It's just the physical. And if it's deemed that it can physically be achieved, as is the case here, albeit it would require the reduction in height of the hedge as set out in the paper, then the planning position, the national planning policy position, as set out in previous reporters' decisions, is that you can use this negative suspension condition, which is the bit I don't like from a legal perspective, and you would actually require to do that rather than refuse consent. So if everything else in an application is ticked off and is acceptable, then the planning approach that we require to adopt is you would grant the consent and you would impose a negative suspension condition that says, but you can't actually do anything with that consent until you achieve legally and commercially the ability to deliver that which can be delivered physically in terms of the right to get that hedge cut, whether you acquire the land it's on or a servitude right to maintain it at a certain, but there would be the scope to do a deal. But that would mean the ability of a developer in that situation to implement that consent is entirely rested on their ability to reach an agreement with the owners of the hedge. So if, as is always the case in these situations, and I believe it's reported here as currently the position that the owners in that situation of the hedge will never agree to anything, then it does beg the question, what's the point? However, that's not one for us to answer. I absolutely confirm to members that I'm satisfied, although I don't like it, legally, that the legal position is as set out, and that the roads issues, while I understand they are of concern and ARA have addressed those in terms of what we would expect to be in place, the fact that they don't own the hedge they would need to be able to cut to deliver it does not constitute a ground of refusal here. It would require us to deal with that aspect, as I've said, with this negative suspensive condition. If everything else is okay, and obviously the recommendation of the report reflects my own view and my planning colleague's view that other aspects of this require it to be refused appropriately. But in relation to the roads issue, it is as set out. It wouldn't be a ground of refusal. It would be something that, if the consent was otherwise granted, the developer would have to go off and secure through negotiation and legal agreement with the owners of the hedge. So even if it's granted today and the owners of the hedge remain resolute that they're never minded in this particular case to reach such an agreement, then any consent would not be capable of being implemented because that initial negative suspensive condition couldn't be complied with. And that's why I don't like it. And I respect and understand from the public perception that that's a bit hard to swallow, that we are required in those circumstances, if everything else was okay, to issue a consent that may not be capable of being implemented. It does beg the question, what's the point? But that's for those who make the national policy and make the decisions at the reporters level and are signed off by the Scottish ministers, I think, to reflect on. We can only work within the rules and processes and the statutory planning framework as it stands at any point in time, and that's what the report absolutely reflects, Chair.
Only, Chair, to stress to members that the observations of the opinion of the Environmental Health Service is based on physical observations at the site rather than any modelling assessment. We have carried out a number of visits to the site. We have witnessed odour and noise on several occasions, and on that basis we would wish to maintain our objection to the development.
I'd like to thank everyone for their input. Now, members, it's over to you, and I'd like to remind you that we have planning, we have environmental health, and we have ARA with us today if you require anything, and legal as well, beg your pardon. So over for questions, thank you. If there's no further questions.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Provost Todd.
Provost Todd.
Thanks very much, convener, and thanks everyone that contributed. And before I ask my question, well done to the lady that is looking after our native amphibians. That really gladdened my heart this morning. That our communities are looking after our communities. Well done, that lady. May I ask the developers, it's an overarching question, and it was about the mitigation.
Sorry, Provost, sorry to cut across you, but there's no questions to the developers now, thank you.
For officers.
It's for officers
All right.
only.
Oh, officers yet not, right, I get mixed up there, I apologise. And it was if officers are happy with the mitigation that was going to be put in to raise the bottom of the site. This might be for environmental or planners. And it was to raise the bottom of the site because a lot of the other houses have got gambions put in place. And I wondered if any mitigation of that site, bearing in mind the flooding issues that regularly happen in from the Carmel water in the field at the bottom of the site to the south. Do we think that any developer in that situation has got the proper mitigations put in place that would make that site suitable for house building in any situation regarding the way that the land drops off to the south? Thank you.
Okay, Marion is going to answer that for you, Provost. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. In terms of land raising, if that's really what you're alluding to there, we don't have any proposed levels from the applicants at the moment, but if they were to submit that in any revised scheme or whatever, and that was the case that they did wish to raise land levels and then make the land more developable, if you like, that would be an issue for ourselves and for ARA to look at. However, land raising when it's in the flood zone, which the south of the site partially is, just simply usually displaces the water elsewhere, so it becomes somebody else's problem. SPP does advise against land raising within the flood zone to make land developable. However, you might see online from the ARA flooding response that there are certain areas that ARA flooding will allow to flood, if you like, because it doesn't bring properties into any flood risk. So that can be parking areas, or it could be, in theory, a play zone as well, purely from ARA flooding's flood remit point of view. But in terms of planning in SPP, Scottish Planning Policy, there is a caution against raising land for development purposes because it will simply displace floodwaters elsewhere. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions from members? I don't see any more questions. Do we feel we can make a determination with the information that's in front of us? Thank you. Do I have a proposer?
Yeah.
Councillor Friel.
I propose that we agree the recommendation to refuse, as I think if you look at paragraph 8, page 67, it sort of just encapsulates everything that I feel about this proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Friel. Councillor Todd.
Thanks, Convener. I agree with Councillor Friel and I would second her proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Is anyone otherwise minded?
Nope.
No, thank you. In that case, it's refusal as recommended in the planning papers. Thank you very much, everybody.